My boyfriend told me to be quiet, and he's never regretted anything more. Felipe had been making little remarks for months, saying I could talk someone to death or joking about whether I ever ran out of words. I told myself it was just him joking. But one night at his best friend's party, I was telling her about my promotion, and he said, "Jesus Christ, would you just shut the F up for once in your life?" He said, loud enough for the whole party to hear. "Nobody cares about your boring job, and you sound like a desperate attention." Everyone went dead silent while my face burned. And Felipe just laughed and said this was what he dealt with every day. I didn't say another word the rest of the night, and Felipe was loving it on the drive home, cranking up the music and going on about how peaceful everything was without my yapping. When I stayed quiet through Sunday breakfast, too, he literally kissed my forehead and said we should do this more often. I didn't talk the rest of Sunday, which he seemed to love. But then Monday morning, he missed his huge presentation because I didn't remind him to set his alarm like I always did. He woke up 2 hours late, losing his mind about why I didn't wake him. I just stared at him while he ran around like a headless chicken trying to find his laptop and his good tie. His boss called to tell him not to bother coming in at all. And Felipe spent the whole night raging about almost getting fired while I sat there silent, making him even madder. "This is your fault," he kept saying. But I just looked at him with dead eyes and said nothing. Then he completely forgot his mom's 60th birthday dinner because I usually handle all family stuff for him. She left 6 sobbing voicemails that I obviously didn't mention, each one more hysterical than the last. And by the time he checked his phone, she was convinced he hated her. He called me a psycho bitch for taking this so far. But honestly, his tantrum just made me more committed to never speaking to him again. His mom called his sister crying about how her only son had abandoned her. And suddenly, the whole family was involved in the drama. Everything snowballed from there because his coworker had stopped by our apartment Tuesday when he wasn't home. And I just stood there mute while she asked if I was okay for like 10 minutes straight. She kept asking if Felipe hurt me, if I needed help, if I could blink twice for yes. And I just stared at her until she left looking terrified. She went back to the office convinced Felipe was abusing me, and suddenly he was getting called into meetings about domestic violence resources and mandatory counseling. His boss literally asked if they needed to do a welfare check on me, and Felipe had to explain that I was giving him the silent treatment, which made him sound even more like an abuser. Friday's company gala was absolutely beautiful to watch unfold. Every executive who tried talking to me got complete silence, while Felipe scrambled to explain I was just shy, which nobody bought because I'd been chatty at last year's event. The CEO's wife cornered me in the bathroom trying to slip me women's shelter pamphlets. And when I wouldn't respond, she called security to make sure Felipe wasn't holding me hostage or something. HR put him on immediate leave before we even made it to the parking lot, saying they needed to investigate the concerning reports about his home situation. Saturday, his friends came over for game night and finally understood why everyone was worried. "What the hell did you do to her?" his best friend asked after I served snacks without saying a word. Felipe actually admitted what he'd said, and you could feel the temperature drop. They all left making excuses about early mornings and forgotten commitments, and his best friend told me I deserved better on his way out, which made Felipe throw a beer bottle at the wall after they were gone. By Sunday, Felipe was coming apart at the seams because his sister was threatening to call the cops. His mom had disowned him, and his job was investigating him for abuse. "Just say something," he screamed, following me around the house. "One word and this nightmare ends." But I walked past him toward the garage to grab orange juice from the spare fridge, still not making a sound even when he grabbed my arm, trying to stop me. The garage was a death trap of crap from the previous owners. Paint cans from the 80s, boxes of rusted tools, old chemicals, all piled on these rickety metal shelves that looked like they'd collapse if you breathed on them wrong. He followed me in there, still screaming about how I was destroying his life when he positioned himself right under the worst shelf, loaded with ancient paint cans that had to weigh a ton. He was gesturing so hard the whole thing started shaking. And I watched the rusty bracket bend under 200 pounds of toxic chemicals. "You know what? You're right. I don't want your voice back." I don't even want you anymore, he yelled. You were getting fat anyway. Now at least you're fat and quiet. The shelf made this horrible groaning sound and started tipping forward. All those cans sliding toward the edge while Felipe kept ranting about how much better his life was now. The bracket snapped completely and everything started falling toward his skull. I jumped back as 20 paint cans crashed down where Felipe stood. He tried to dodge but wasn't fast enough. A heavy can caught his shoulder and sent him sprawling onto the concrete floor. More cans bounced off his back and legs while he screamed and covered his head with his arms. One can split open and thick paint splattered across the garage floor. Felipe rolled away from the mess, clutching his temple where a sharp edge had caught him. Blood ran down the side of his face and dripped onto his shirt. He was yelling about his head hurting while I pulled my phone from my pocket. My hands were steady as I dialed 911 and held the phone to my ear. The dispatcher answered asking what my emergency was, but I didn't say anything. I just held the line open while Felipe moaned and cursed in the background. The dispatcher kept asking if anyone could hear her, saying she was tracing the call. Felipe saw me holding the phone and started screaming that I did this on purpose. He said I knew the shelf would fall and I tried to kill him. His accusations got wilder as more blood ran down his face. The dispatcher said units were on the way and to stay on the line. 8 minutes later, I heard sirens getting closer. The paramedics rushed into the garage and found Felipe sitting against the wall holding his bleeding head. They immediately started checking him while asking what happened. I stood there watching without saying a word. One paramedic shined a light in Felipe's eyes, checking for concussion signs. The other one noticed the collapsed shelf and toxic chemicals spilling everywhere. She called for hazmat backup on her radio. Felipe kept ranting that I set him up, but the paramedics were focused on his injuries. They loaded him onto a gurney while he kept accusing me of attempted murder. The hazmat team arrived and started containing the spill while we headed to the hospital. I followed the ambulance in my car. At the emergency room, they took Felipe straight back for treatment. I sat in the waiting room filling out his insurance paperwork. An hour later, a police officer walked in and introduced himself as Nicholas McCarty. He said the paramedics reported this as a suspicious accident and he needed statements. He asked me direct questions about what happened in the garage. I finally broke my silence with just the basic facts. Old shelf. Felipe was yelling. It fell. I kept my answers short and didn't mention our relationship problems or the past week of silence. Officer McCarty took notes and asked if Felipe had grabbed me or hurt me physically. I showed him the bruises on my arm from where Felipe grabbed me earlier. He took photos and wrote more notes. Felipe's sister burst through the emergency room doors looking furious. She spotted me and started screaming that I tried to murder her brother. She said everyone knew I was crazy and this proved it. Security had to physically escort her to a different waiting area while she kept yelling threats. Officer McCarty watched the whole thing and made more notes in his notebook. The doctor came out and told us Felipe needed 12 stitches for the head wound. He had a concussion and needed overnight observation but should fully recover. Felipe was demanding I be arrested when Officer McCarty went to take his statement. I could hear him through the curtain saying I planned the whole thing. Officer McCarty came back and said there was no evidence of criminal intent. The shelf was old and poorly installed, just an unfortunate accident caused by worn-out equipment. From his hospital bed, Felipe kept shouting that I'd tried to kill him. I left without stopping by his room. Walking to my car, my hands shook for the first time all night. Sitting in the driver's seat, I realized I couldn't go home. Felipe would be discharged tomorrow, and that apartment was no longer safe. I needed somewhere else for the night. I texted Audrey Graham, asking if I could stay at her place for a few days. Within seconds my phone rang, and Audrey didn't even wait for me to answer before talking. She'd already heard about Felipe's party meltdown and told me I could stay as long as I needed. I drove straight back to the apartment while Felipe was still in the hospital under observation. The place felt wrong without him, but I grabbed a duffel and started throwing clothes inside. I packed my laptop, birth certificate, passport, social security card, and the emergency cash I'd hidden in an old tampon box. My hands moved quickly, pulling underwear and work clothes from drawers while I tried not to think. 15 minutes later, the bag was zipped and I was out the door. A voicemail buzzed in from a man named Chuck Hernandez, who said he was the property manager. He mentioned the hazmat team in our garage and needed to document things for insurance. According to him, the shelves had been put in by tenants back in the 90s and were a major code violation that should have been fixed years ago. I saved the message and drove to Audrey's place across town. She met me at the door, carried my bag to her spare room, and didn't ask a single question. The room was small, just a twin bed and an old dresser, but it felt safer than anywhere else. While I unpacked, Audrey explained the ground rules. She'd help me look for my own place. I was welcome to stay, but this was temporary, not permanent. I nodded, grateful for the space. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, Officer McCarty called with follow-up questions about the incident. He asked about the bruising on my arm from when Felipe grabbed me in the garage. He said it could matter in a domestic violence case if I chose to pursue it. I told him I'd think about it, then hung up, feeling sick. I found a notebook in Audrey's kitchen and started writing everything down. First the party humiliation, then the silent treatment, Felipe missing his presentation, his mom's birthday disaster, the coworker suspecting abuse, and the gala mess. Seeing it all in order made the pattern undeniable. Felipe had been spiraling, and I just endured it until I finally broke. Later, Allison Sayers from HR at Felipe's company called. She wanted my account of the gala and his recent behavior. She promised confidentiality and said it wouldn't interfere with any legal matters. I gave her the basics about the party, the silent treatment, and how people had become concerned. She said she'd follow up if needed. That afternoon, I got texts from an unknown number. It was Felipe. He'd been discharged and was already sending messages that swung between insults and begging. One called me a psycho who tried to kill him. The next said he loved me and couldn't live without me. I screenshotted every one and created a new folder just for his texts. Later, Chuck Hernandez emailed me the official report. The shelves had been installed without permits in 1993. That meant I had no liability for the accident. A small weight lifted. I forwarded it to Officer McCarty in case it became relevant. Felipe's texts kept coming, veering from blame to desperation. He said I'd ruined his life, then begged me to come back, then promised therapy if I'd just talk to him. I saved them all. That evening, I saw a voicemail from Felipe's mom. Her voice cracked as she begged me to talk to him, said he was falling apart, said she'd always loved me like a daughter. I saved the message but didn't call back. Any contact would just give Felipe an opening to manipulate me again. After 3 years, I knew his patterns too well. The next morning, Audrey caught me staring at my phone. She sat across from me with her coffee, watching for a while before finally asking if my silence was payback or if I was really trying to protect myself. Audrey's question hit harder than I expected, and I realized I didn't even know what I wanted anymore. Maybe revenge, maybe safety, but mostly, I just wanted to move forward. She squeezed my hand and left for work, while I tried to figure out next steps. That afternoon, I met HR rep Allison Sellers at a coffee shop. She took notes as I went through the party, the gala, and Felipe's ongoing behavior. I stuck to facts, and she assured me they'd investigate. The next day, Officer McCarty called again, suggesting I file for a protective order given the bruises, threats, and texts. He sent me the forms, and I started filling them out with shaking hands. 2 days later, a patrol car waited while I quickly collected clothes, papers, and essentials from the apartment. It felt hollow and strange, but I left without looking back. That evening, Audrey told me Felipe was officially on investigatory leave from work. Relief mixed with fear because I knew he'd blame me. Soon after, his sister started sending me abusive texts, accusing me of destroying their family. I forwarded everything to Officer McCarty for documentation. The next morning, a friend sent screenshots from a group chat where Felipe had been mocking me for months, calling me annoying and joking about silencing me. One message even said he planned to put me in my place, with others cheering him on. I saved it all, feeling sick. Audrey helped me look at secure apartments, and I found a small studio with cameras and a doorman, hopefully available next week. That night, Felipe's mom texted me, saying she missed me and wanted us to reconcile, without acknowledging his behavior. I saved her message but didn't reply. Finally, I sent Felipe one clear text. All communication had to go through lawyers. Within an hour, he was spamming me insults, begging, and threats to show up at Audrey's place. I kept forwarding Felipe's texts to Officer McCarty, who added them to my file. The next morning, HR's Allison Sellers said executives and staff had confirmed Felipe was grabbing me and yelling at the gala. Even the CEO's wife admitted she almost called 911. The HR case was getting stronger. That afternoon, Chuck Hernandez sent his inspection report showing the garage shelves were illegally installed in 1994 and a code violation, clearing me of liability. Meanwhile, Felipe kept flooding me with angry and apologetic messages, 47 in one night. The next day, I went to the courthouse. The clerk explained the protective order process and gave me a packet on harassment and abuse. Later, McCarty visited with resources, pointing out how Felipe's behavior followed clear escalation patterns. I opened my own bank account, moved money out of our joint account, canceled shared subscriptions, and changed passwords. Every step cutting another tie. Allison's investigation showed Felipe was also having angry outbursts at work, throwing things and scaring coworkers. 2 days later, I filed for a protective order with all my evidence, screenshots, reports, and photos of bruises. The judge approved a temporary order immediately, barring Felipe from contacting me or coming near me. He was served at his office, and soon after, his meltdown spilled onto social media. He accused me of ruining his life, but most people ignored him or told him to get help. 3 days later, Allison called again. HR had finished their investigation. Felipe had broken multiple workplace rules, and they were deciding between anger management or termination. That same afternoon, Audrey took me to look at apartments. I needed my own place soon. The first 2 apartments I saw were awful, but the third was a tiny studio above a bakery that smelled like fresh bread every morning. The landlord offered me a month-to-month lease, and I applied using Audrey's address. 2 days before the protective order hearing, I organized everything, texts, photos of bruises, McCarty's reports, and a timeline into a binder. On the day of court, I stayed calm as I explained Felipe's grabbing, threats, and texts. His lawyer tried to discredit me, but Felipe admitted to grabbing my arm. The judge extended the protective order for 6 months, warning he'd be arrested if he broke it. The following week, Allison from HR said Felipe wasn't fired, but was reassigned to data entry after mandatory anger management, with no promotions for at least a year. His mom kept sending me emotional texts, while his sister ranted online until people reminded her Felipe admitted guilt. 2 weeks later, Audrey helped me move into the studio. The furniture was secondhand and mismatched, but it was all mine. That first night, I cooked pasta, smelled bread from the bakery below, and finally slept through the night without fear. A few days later, Felipe used a friend to message me on Facebook. I reported it to Officer McCarty, who documented it as another attempt to get around the order. I blocked the friend and locked down my social media. The next week, I filed small claims for my share of the deposit, utilities, and furniture, about $800, wanting every tie cut. Weeks later, Chuck called to say the garage was finally cleared out, with old paint, chemicals, and even pesticides from the 70s removed. The landlord sent me $400, which covered part of my new deposit. A week later, I started therapy through work. My therapist helped me see how my silence went from protection to a weapon, and we agreed not to engage with Felipe's lawyer's fake apology letter. At small claims mediation. Felipe agreed to pay me $400 of the $800 I asked for, and we signed papers to only contact through lawyers. Therapy helped me find healthier ways to speak up, and I began settling into a routine, work, weekly sessions, and slowly reconnecting with friends. Felipe finished his counseling and started dating someone new, but I stayed out of it. 2 months after the garage shelf fell, I was doing okay. Plants on the windowsill, walls painted soft blue, sleeping through the night and focusing better at work. My boss hinted at a promotion, and I even joined a book club where I finally spoke up. The settlement money helped me buy real furniture, including a reading chair I loved. The bakery downstairs became comforting background noise. Friends started inviting me places again. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and that was enough.